order to be able to get it through the FVAP website as well. Same thing with the FWAB online. They can actually mark their candidates online. We populate the database with all the federal candidates so that the voter can actually choose their federal candidates online. For this last election, they could choose their senatorial candidate, their House candidate online. It is not voting online. It still prints out on the paper ballot, hard copy printout, wet signature, postal mail return. We had pretty good use. In 2008, we had about 20,000 downloads of the federal postcard application. We had about 4 times that much, 5 times that much in 2010, with about 91,000 downloads from the FPCA wizard. We had zero FWAB wizard downloads. We had almost 20,000 downloads this time. So of course that's an infinite rate of return, and that's the numbers that I use in order to be able for my performance evaluation. Infinite rate of return. No, but we're pretty pleased with that, and we're hoping that we can build upon that as well. Big states, top 5 for the uniformed services download of FWABs: Florida, California, Texas, Michigan, North Carolina. For the overseas citizen, California, Florida, North Carolina, Virginia, and New York. About 71% of the use of our system was by uniformed service members, 29% overseas civilian. Only about 4% were overseas indefinitely. Most of them were overseas temporarily. We about doubled our website visitation over 2006. And the big thing is that the FWAB usage went up about 200%. The FPCA usage, this is both from the static site and from the wizard. So we think that what happened with the FPCAs is basically we had a shifting from people using the static site to using the wizard. But the FWAB, I mean, it's almost all use of the wizard. So going back to this, if a state has an online, for getting the ballot for the Virginia system, takes them right to this. This was an FVAP funded system. We had the electronic voting support wizard, and in fact, we weren't the only ones out there. So there were 17 states that participated in the FVAP-supported online ballot delivery and marking wizard, but 14 states had their own. And more than if every state had it, there's no preference to our system. If a state has their own system, we're going to drive the voter to that system. We do not want to, and we're going to drive the voter to those online ballot delivery systems over the FWAB. We need to, one of the things we all need to be doing is that as the election's coming up, we need to be telling voters that, yeah, the FWAB is out there, but the FWAB is actually a point of failure. The FWAB is because they didn't get the regular ballot. And for 31 states have online ballot delivery systems, the first thing we need to be saying to someone is that they can't find their ballot is, check your state system. Link to those state systems. Provide them the direct link to those state systems. You can send them to us, and we'll send them to those state systems. But that's where we need to be driving them first. Some unique issues. One of the things we also found was that the longer a jurisdiction had been using electronic delivery, the greater the utilization. So Howard Scholl, he's been doing electronic transmission before there was electronic transmission, I think, in Delaware. And so they had about half their ballots being sent out by our electronic voting support wizard. And probably the other half are being sent out by email, or a quarter of those. Chicago, been doing this for 10 years. 86% of their ballots sent by email. West Virginia also had 5 counties doing a full internet voting system with Seidel and Everyone Counts. And then Washington and Colorado had their own systems in addition to the electronic voting support wizard. I just couldn't figure out how to be able to do in PowerPoint both brown and green stripes. So we had about 3,500 downloads, top state New York, but Missouri, 142 downloads from a single county. Wendy Norden, God bless her, getting the word out. This is the other thing we found. If the election official advertised, communicated with the voter about the system, the usage was far greater than if we ever tried to communicate with them. So that's why we really encourage the voter to put in their FPCA the email address, so even if you don't have a system, at least you can communicate with them. Okay, I said before, you can have all the great systems in the world, you can have every state signing on to it. If the voter doesn't know about it, it doesn't matter. So we had an extensive communication strategy in order to be able to try to drive the voter to there. We wanted to drive them to FVAP.gov as the portal for everything else. And try to reduce that burden on the voting assistance officer and the reliance upon the voting assistance officer. We wanted to focus on the critical paths of success. I hear all the time, why am I getting these federal postcard applications 10 days before the election? Sort of difficult for me to send out a ballot 45 days prior to the election if I don't know about the guy until 10 days before the election. So we focus around the 4th of July to tell people, request your absentee ballot, get your FPCA in, and we focus at the end of September saying, send your ballot in now. If you don't have your ballot, try to see if you can get an online ballot delivery. If that doesn't work, use our FVAP wizard. And we wanted to target some underperforming populations. In 2008, the only reason that the military had a lower voter participation rate than the general population without adjusting for age and gender is that the 18 to 24-year-old cohort had a 10 percentage point lower voter participation rate than the general population. So we really wanted to focus on the 18 to 24-year-olds because, and where do they live? They're digital natives, so we invaded their hometown. And then military spouses as well. Military spouses don't have access to the voting assistance officers. We wanted to be able to reach out to them as well, alternate means. We had a very extensive social media program. We also did some, you probably saw, I have to watch my tweets because I was at the Gov 2.0 conference where they were talking about the challenge.gov, and I tweeted, challenge.gov, really cool. Let's see if FVAP can do something. And then all of a sudden, Government Computer News reports in the paper that day that FVAP is going to be one of the first users of challenge.gov. And then Beverly Godwin, who runs all these social media programs for the General Services Administration, sends me an email saying, Bob, let's talk. So I didn't realize that of my 125 tweet followers that people actually read it. We went from, we also did an extensive social media advertising, a digital media advertising campaign using foreign IP addresses or military IP addresses, and then comparing that against access to U.S. content. And so we had this animated ad. If you clicked on it, it turned into a ballot. Then you see the check mark going into the ballot box. Then the ballot gets folded up into a paper airplane and flies off the screen. And then the box comes up, says visit FVAP.gov to get your ballot. We found about 70% of our website traffic was being driven from these ads. And we went from 400 friends on Facebook to 4,000 in about 6 weeks. Now, Admiral Mullen, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has 11,000, so I give him guidance that we'll have no more than 10,999. But I want 10,999. We also did full-page ads in newspapers. This military one ran in Stars and Stripes and Defense Times. That picture is on the far wall of my office directly across from me, so I see him all the time. Did this ad over here in Military Spouse magazine, and then we ran this one down in the bottom right-hand corner in the International Herald Tribune. Again, we ran it 4th of July, focus on voting focus on the availability of voting assistance officers to get your FPCA in, and then again at the end of September saying send in your ballot now. If you don't have your ballot, try to see if you can find it online. If you can't find it there, use the FVAP. And then Gunnar Clark's going to be talking in the next session. Man, this is just way too late in the day to be doing this out of beer. Gunnar Clark is going to be talking about this in the next session about the express mail delivery system. Really sweet system they pulled together here. Instead of having big envelopes, they had these stickers that would put on the top of the envelope to send back, and they had some great success. But I'm going to let him talk about that because they did a real stand-up job on that. So in our 2010 post-election survey, we're in the middle of it right now. As I said before, we're doing LEOs. I didn't put LEOs up there. We're doing active duty military. We're doing military dependents for the first time. We're doing overseas civilian, both a controlled sample based upon the State Department's warden list, but also a convenient sample based upon anyone just signing in and doing it. This isn't going to be something that we can really draw a whole lot from on the overseas civilians because there could be 2 million, there could be 4 million. It's pretty difficult to make voter participation, voter registration numbers when the denominator can change by 100%. So one of the reasons we're doing this survey as well is to actually try to see if we can determine how many overseas civilians there are. I'll discuss what we're doing on that as well. One of the things that we also found from the 2008 survey and seems to be holding up in the 2010 survey is about a third of military voters actually vote in person. They don't vote by absentee ballot. And a lot of other surveys won't be able to capture that because they're focusing on the absentee voting process. But a lot of voters vote in person. In addition to Texas and Florida being two of the biggest military population states from voting residents, they're also from being stationed. And so when people are stationed there, Jackie Callan in Bexar County complains all the time about people being stationed at local San Antonio air bases, applying for an absentee ballot. No, go down to the polling place. And so that's something we got to work on as well. The other thing that really struck us is that while Election jurisdictions with more than 25,000 total voters represented about 15% of the total number of election jurisdictions. They represented 92% of the absentee ballots, UOCAVA absentee ballots sent. So this actually makes surveying a little easier because you can sort of focus, on the larger jurisdictions given that centralization. We're also doing a state legislative initiative. We've done this every year where we send out all the legislative initiatives that we recommend to states as what to do. We're deriving this off of the the text that we're using is the Uniform Law Commission's text. What? And Crocky never gets a contract. Do I have enough money? Now, one of the things we found, so basically, we put this index to the areas we found the failure. Where's 80% of the failure? It's in absentee ballot delivery and return. So we had 80% of the score based upon things that would address that type of failure. So if a state has 45-day transit time, email and online ballot transmission, and universal use of the FVAP, they get at least 75 points. And our goal is having every state at 75% by 2014 or 2016. I keep on forgetting. I think it's 2014. I haven't given our legislative folks much time, but we've gone from 53% in October 2009 to 63% already. This is just the average. Our goal is to have every state at 75% or greater. And so we're really, we're strong supporters of the Uniform Military Overseas Voting Act, the Uniform Law Commission. And the folks from the Uniform Law Commission are here. I can't see where they are. In the back there. If you haven't talked to them already, especially from one of the states, please do. Or if you have large state presence in your organizations, please talk to them. What else? And one of the things they did say, the Secretary of State said, you may recognize some of these faces here. Secretary Cortez, Secretary Bowen. And one of the things that came out of the report was that the sheer variation among states in voting rules was in and of itself a detriment to voting. Through really rigorous editing, we've been able to take our voting assistance guide from 390 pages down to 309 pages. It's still a doorstop, okay? It needs to be 10 to 15 pages. And uniformity amongst the states will achieve that. This has been endorsed by the Conference of State Governments and by the Alliance of Military and Overseas Voting Rights. And if a state adopts UMOVA, their legislative initiative score will be 88%, which would probably take them into the top 10 of all the states until all the states are in the top 10. What are our goals? Improve the voter success rate to meet or exceed that of the general population. We're not looking for the military and the overseas voter to become the uber voter. We think they're representative of the general population. We want them to have the experience and the opportunity the same as the general population. So we're focusing on voter success. Not voting is also a right. We're not Australia. We don't fine people if they don't vote. Not voting is also a right. There was actually a strong military culture of not voting. General Eisenhower, for the first time he was ever registered to vote, was when he ran for president. And so we're going to focus on the absentee ballot cast rate and on the FVAP utilization and counted rate of those casts. We want to bring all those state legislative initiative scores up to 75%. We want to see if we can quantify the overseas civilian population, both demographically and geographically. And we want to streamline the voting process so that any stage of it is less than 15 minutes, except if you're actually casting the ballot in California, which we probably think we're going to leave it about 90 minutes. I mean, you guys just have so many initiatives, I mean, just take... So what are our key initiatives for 2012? Now, David Byrne in the next session is going to be discussing these in a little greater detail. But we're looking at, expanding our outreach communications to the voter, both in print media and digital media. We're looking at partnerships with major organizations that will be able to help get the word out more as well as online training for the voter. We want to improve those online wizards. One of the things we thought about was if you put a barcode on it, then it may, on the FPCA, it may be much easier for the election official to upload the data to the voter registration system. Same thing for the FVAP. Maybe you can have a barcode on the FVAP that will automatically generate a print-on-demand ballot that you then can send through the ballot reader in order to be able to reduce the transcription errors. we have to take the notary section off the FVAP and the FPCA since MOVE Act eliminated the notary requirement. So we thought, well, we have to go through the Federal Register, Paperwork Reduction Act, Administrative Processes Act process anyway. Let's redesign the babies. So we're actually looking to crowdsource this as much as possible. David Byrne is running this effort. David, where's your hand? David, right over here. Talk to him if you have ideas about how the FPCA and the FVAP should be redesigned. We're also going to be talking about a Wounded Warrior Research Initiative that we're kicking off next week down at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio. We're going to be trying to catalog. People don't realize that people are returning to active duty after being wounded with substantial wounds. There are people in Iraq and Afghanistan right now, military serving members in uniform with prosthetics. And so we want to make sure that we're providing them the type of voting assistance they need. And we're also going to conduct a mock election with many of the vendors that participate in the Electronic Voting Support Wizard program, as well as other vendors, in order to be able to test some of those assistive devices. We're taking our website, we're going to be building a bunch of databases around it, not only voting assistance officers and local election officials that are going to feed into the rest of our databases, but also make them accessible to the general public, both in an API architecture. For election officials, we're going to have a grant research program I was just discussing with the National Association of State Election Directors that hopefully will allow them to experience the fun and joy of a contracting process rather than force them to come through the seventh level of Dante's Inferno, otherwise known as the federal contracting process. We're working on our legislative initiatives, and then we're also looking at LEO training. And then finally, on the technology side, we're looking at security research. We're going to expand the NIST EAC FVAP summit we had last August on ballot security and extend that to blank ballot delivery security. We're going to probably look to try to do that in Chicago sometime in March. We're looking to do a national level threat analysis, as well as one of the things we're working with the Technical Guidelines Development Committee of, if the big problem is the control for electronic voting, if one of the big problems is the control of the computers being used against infection by malware. Well, the Defense Information Systems Network, the military computers, have a relatively good level of control over those computers. Will that resolve that? Could that reduce the risk sufficiently that you might then be able to start looking at some of these systems? And then we're also going to be doing, along with the other tests in mock election, we're going to be doing some tests with the VISTLs, the Voting Systems Technology Laboratories, to test against the recently published EAC pilot testing requirements with a number of the vendors. So on this 2012 grant program, we're looking to basically try to do the same thing we did with the Electronic Voting Support Wizard in 2010, but let the states expand the scope and let the states define what they want and let them just basically extend the money to them and let them do it. And we want to expand the scope. We want to look at online registration, absentee ballot request, online and expedited ballot delivery, website improvement. I added this morning. I heard someone talk about how some of the state websites weren't that good, and I was like, ding! Let's put website improvement in there as well. And then we worked yesterday in a working group with a bunch of state election directors as to what should be the grant consideration criteria. We're looking to put out that broad agency announcement sometime, I don't know, I think in like the next month. And we're looking to get the money out the door by the end of the summer. We have a slogan contest on the way. Kathleen, where are you? Kathleen McDonald, running our slogan and poster contest. So if you have an idea about how to do a better slogan or poster for FVAP's programs, the winner of the poster goes on our voting assistance guide. And the winner of each of these challenges get to come to the GI Film Festival, where we're going to announce the winners at the GI Film Festival. And then we're also going to probably announce at the GI Film Festival a PSA video contest, public service announcement video contest, where people will be able to upload. We're going to do the Doritos. Hopefully no one is going to give, the best part of the vote is licking the finger. I mean, that was just such a disgusting ad. But I want to eat Doritos now. So, I mean, it worked. But we have this contest underway right now through challenge.gov. After that tweet, I had to do it through challenge.gov. And so, this is, hopefully, if you have ideas, you'll submit them. How many slogans do we have right now?
500.
Great. And how many posters? See, we need posters. Graphic artists, we need posters. That's it. We're moving down to the Mark Center, which is down in Alexandria as part of the base realignment and closure process in October. And so the finest, I lose my office. If you have not been to my office, you need to come to my office. It is totally out of whack with what any government worker should have. And you got to see my view. So come before October. So that's our address. That's my direct line. That's my email address. Feel free to contact at any time. I've gone over, so I guess you don't want me to answer any questions, but apparently I'm buying the beer. So thank you. Yeah, I get the PDF version to OVF as well, so they can post that up there.
I think in the interest of time, we're going to have 2 questions.
Okay.
So I'll try to be quick. Bob, thanks. I think there's great work here. I know you like to talk about risk. I think you're characterizing the disenfranchisement that's going on, characterizing that as a risk problem, I think is a mistake.
Well, oh God, the guy in the TGDC from Washington. No, not Paul Miller. Dark-haired guy. Mark Wagner. He characterizes this as a denial of service attack, as the equivalent of a denial of service attack. The fact of the matter is that, there is risk inherent in the current system, whether by design or by default. We have accepted in the current system a risk of 300,000 people a year not being able to cast their ballots. So when we look at any future voting system, to demand a higher level of security or risk, or lower level of risk than what is inherent in the current system, I think is unfair to military and overseas voters.
Yeah, the problem is that I agree completely that kind of disenfranchisement is a terrible thing. If you randomly take 20% of the votes out of the system, the chance of it changing the outcome of an election is very, very small. And getting the wrong result is the principal risk in the election.
If there was any other community in the United States, where 300,000 of them were systematically unable to cast their ballots, it would look like Tahrir Square.
Agreed. We don't want to disenfranchise voters for lots of reasons, but there are many things that have a higher risk of getting the wrong outcome.
Well, that's a cost-benefit analysis, and that's a risk assessment. I mean, who knows? People could very well be right. The risk of online voting could be far greater than 300,000 ballots not being counted. No one's really done that assessment. We haven't assessed the risk in the current system, so we have nothing to compare the risk for future systems. We've established no methods of measuring risk of either the current system or future system in order to be able to compare those risks. Until we do that, to be able to say that we can't do something because it's too risky, risky is compared to what?
Here. Thank you very much for your presentation and all your energy on the subject. I thought it was very interesting earlier today when Maryland presented their data that they have an interesting statistic. They is a downloaded ballot system, both for their military and overseas voters and their stateside voters. And they noticed that the military and overseas voters had this failure, like you've noticed, where only 25% of the ballots are being returned. And yet, using the exact same system, 79.6%, they said, are being returned for the stateside voters. And I was thinking about that in terms of this conversation, and I'm wondering whether we're characterizing this as a failure in the system somehow, but maybe it's not a failure in the system. Maybe it's a difference in the population, or someone suggested.
Well, Larry Sabato says that the military doesn't care as much about off-year elections because the commander-in-chief is not at the top of the ballot. And that's an empirical issue. That's an empirical issue. Mm-hmm.
But it's, I think, just interesting to Maryland seems to have this data that with the same system there's a disparity, and it'd be interesting to understand why that disparity is.
Part of our post-election survey that we're doing, we're also asking voter interest. So in the 2008 survey, about 55% said about 28% said they were very interested, about 57% said they were somewhat interested. In our preliminary data, we have probably about a 55% total interest rate in 2010. And so what we need to be able to measure is voter participation rate against interest, and see also what the comparable interest level is in the general population, to see if that's an adequate measure. I don't know if that's an adequate measure. It may not be, but here's the flip side of that. In 2000, after the 2008 election, the Election Assistance Commission said that I think something like 65% of the automatically transmitted ballots, not the specifically requested for the 2008 election, but 60 to 65% of the automatically transmitted ballots were returned. They were still returned. So yes, there's a lower return rate, but it's still a pretty significant return rate. And in order to be able to present, so now the policy cost benefit analysis is it more important to reduce undeliverable ballots, return to sender ballots, or is it more important to give a voter every opportunity to be able to return a ballot? And that's a policy decision. Okay. Thank you.